From Recorded Future News and PRX, this is Click Here.
So if you could elevate your phone on maybe some books or on a coffee mug just so it's steady.
Okay, yeah, it's right here. It's about 6 inches from my face.
Perfect.
Is that fine? I mean, it's not in
It's
my
like
back.
you've done this before.
Yeah, no, I don't tell my wife this, but I am trainable. Yes. It is possible.
All right, I won't tell her. Our secret. From Recorded Future News, I'm Dina Temple-Rest, and this is Click Here's Mic Drop, a longer listen to one of our favorite interviews of the week. In Tuesday's episode, we brought you the first audio interview with Tigran Gambaryan. He's the compliance officer for Binance who had been detained by the Nigerian government as part of a sweeping case against the crypto platform. And for 8 months, he was considered a high-security prisoner.
They treated me like Hannibal Lecter when they're transporting me. It was ridiculous. Like 2 trucks full of people with rifles, one in the front, one in the back. It was insane.
We'd been reporting on the story since Tigran was first detained. And the question that just kept coming up for us was, what was Nigeria thinking? How did they decide that holding a mid-level executive hostage would somehow bring Binance to heel? So we asked Matthew Page, a Nigeria expert from Chatham House, and he said Tigran's case fits into a larger whole in Nigeria.
A legacy of economic mismanagement, grand corruption, monetary policy failures.
Not just his opinion, by the way. Transparency International, an anti-corruption watchdog, monitors the relationship between politics and money around the world. And then it ranks countries by perceived corruption. And it says Nigeria ranks 140th out of 180, a little better than countries known for corruption like Russia and Iran. And he and other people close to the case told us ultimately one man was behind the decision to detain Tigran Gambaryan. A man who, on paper, seemed a lot like Tigran himself. A former cop, a dogged investigator, a corruption fighter. A Nigerian named Nuhu Ribadu.
He was dynamic, he was fearless, he was capable.
And then something changed. Stay with us. Support for Click Here comes from Curiosity Weekly, a podcast from Discovery. Each episode unpacks breaking science and tech news with experts who can make sense of it all. Recent episodes have covered what neuroscientists have learned from TikTok, how AI manages to read hieroglyphics, and whether today's robots can actually feel pain. All things I've wondered about. On Curiosity Weekly from Discovery, make sense of some of the biggest questions and ideas shaping our world. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Click Here is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. I'm Dina Temple-Rest, and this is Click Here's Mic Drop. So can you tell me a little bit about Nuhu Ribadu?
I know him personally from my time working for the U.S. government. He was seen as very effective and courageous. He's definitely a household name in Nigeria, really because of his anti-corruption work in the early 2000s. Someone who took on very powerful people as a law enforcement official.
If you need a reference point, think Elliot Ness, the cop from The Untouchables who brought down Al Capone.
You fellas are untouchable. Is that the thing? No one can get to you?
You took Capone.
Hey, everyone can be gotten to.
Then I'll see him in hell.
His image of this sort of Elliot Ness untouchable figure outside the mainstream was a very strong and an effective image that he portrayed.
Even though Rabadu was technically in the mainstream, the head of an anti-corruption unit of the government, he maintained this kind of outsider reputation because of how he approached his work. Before Rabadu, a lot of people who presented themselves as corruption busters in Nigeria often ended up doing just the opposite.
Many high-level anti-corruption cases in Nigeria stretch on for 10, 15 years easily because of delaying tactics. And then worse, you've had, for political reasons, presidents who ran on an anti-corruption platform actually pardon governors that the EFCC was successful in convicting. And that, of course, was a huge blow to the overall anti-corruption fight in Nigeria.
But Rabadu was different. There's this kind of famous story about him in which this government official he was investigating thought he could make the case go away by just offering Rabadu a bribe. So he handed Rabadu sacks of cash, actual sacks with millions of dollars inside. And Rabadu, he didn't take the money. Instead, he reported it and moved forward with the case. It made Rabadu and the agency he ran, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, or EFCC, really famous. We asked both Rabadu and the EFCC to talk to us for this story, but both declined. As head of the EFCC, Rabadu opened up so many cases on so many high-ranking Nigerian officials, it was almost inevitable that they would find a way to exact revenge. He spoke about this in a TEDx talk.
In 4 years, I built that institution into one of the most, if not the most successful and formidable anti-corruption agency, not just in Africa, but the world. We convicted hundreds of people. We almost changed the entire fight against corruption in Nigeria. When you fight corruption, it fights back.
Sure enough, in 2008, he was forced out of the EFCC and ended up going into a kind of exile, first in the US and then as a senior fellow at Oxford University. And when he returned to Nigeria, Matthew Page said, Rabadu came back a different man.
This is a little bit like Winston Churchill, who had his time in the wilderness. He went into exile in the US to really for fear of his personal safety, went into the think tank space, and then eventually came back a much more political creature after.
He ran for president in 2011, unsuccessfully. Then he ran for governor, and he lost that too. And it seemed like he just couldn't find a niche in Nigerian public life. And that, Matthew said, is when things changed.
And after 2011, he sort of became one of the bad guys, I guess, or one of the traditional politicians that he had been railing against as anti-corruption commissioner.
He started associating with the same government officials and ruling elite that he used to prosecute.
He raised some eyebrows, including my own.
And this seemed to work. It seemed to find him a place back in the ranks of government that he'd been searching for. And then, a few years ago, in 2023, Rabadu reemerged in a new role as the National Security Advisor to the President. And he had a new target in his sights, too: cryptocurrency. That's when we come back.
Hey, I'm Joseph Cox, the host of another podcast I think you'll like, the 404 Media podcast. We're an independent news outlet covering the bleeding edge of technology, and every week we discuss our latest stories. Whether that's how AI images are taking over Facebook and fooling people, how drugs are being sold on Instagram, or the spread of AI-enabled surveillance cameras, we hold tech to account. Catch me and the rest of the 404 Media gang wherever you listen. Just search for the 404 Media podcast. Chat to you soon.
When Nuhu Rubadu began to turn his attention to cryptocurrency trading in his new role as National Security Advisor to the president, it was inevitable that he'd cross paths with Binance, since it was the most popular crypto exchange in Nigeria. And then, early last year, Rubadu was among a group of officials who invited Tigran Gambaryan to Nigeria, ostensibly to talk about the concerns the government had about Binance's crypto trading there. And the meeting set up a strange intersection. Rubadu, once the corruption fighter, and Tigran Gambaryan, a former law enforcement guy himself. Two men, similar backgrounds, who landed on opposite sides of this crypto debate. Tigran believed in digital currencies. He thought they were the future. And Rubadu, he thought crypto was shady. Tigran arrived for the meeting with Rubadu at some government offices in Abuja, the capital, but nothing seemed to go according to plan.
And they're like, oh, just come in to sit down. They'll come in a little bit. And then we waited for a couple of hours.
Were you worried that you were waiting that long?
It started getting a little weird.
That's when Tigran had this sinking feeling that it wasn't going to be the meeting he expected. And he was right.
One of the guys who was actually responsible for this, he comes in, kind of slaps a folder on the table, starts saying, you've destroyed Nigerian economy.
Those guys who slapped that folder on the table were associates of Rubadu's. And it became clear that the goal wasn't so much about building an airtight case against Binance as it was about sending a message.
Throws him into the jail just to teach him a lesson because he can, and there's no checks and balances over his actions.
That's how Rubadu functioned, even in his previous role. He'd make arrests, grab headlines, name names, but convictions, not the priority. Somewhat understandably, Matthew says.
To be honest, that's understandable in the Nigerian context where it's very hard to achieve convictions because due process and the judicial process is so unreliable and corrupt. And it's not so much that it favors the government side, it sort of favors whoever the highest bidder is.
And remember, Rubadu was working for the Nigerian president, a president who at the time was getting blamed for an economy in freefall. In Binance, Rubadu found a convenient scapegoat for it all.
Really sending a message, right? Trying to deter organizations involved in cryptocurrency and others who are engaged in sort of, foreign exchange arbitrage in Nigeria, and show them that, there was a new sheriff in town, literally. And Rubadu and President Tinubu's involvement in orchestrating it is a very clear attempt to point the finger at an external force and say, it's not our fault the economy's so bad. It's Binance's fault.
Right. And part of the thing is most people don't quite understand how crypto works, so it's pretty easy to point the finger.
Oh, absolutely. And regardless, I think that the presidency in Nigeria has, right, forever, taken a sort of throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks approach.
The president and Rubadu probably guessed that pinning blame on Binance would stick because, well, crypto's got a reputation, doesn't it? Shadowy, unregulated, ripe for suspicion. Sure, cryptocurrency trading is huge in Nigeria, but does that mean people really understand it? Not necessarily. And when something feels opaque, intangible, when it moves in ways that defy easy explanation, well, blame comes easy. From Recorded Future News, this has been Click Here's Mic Drop. It was written and produced by Sean Powers, Megan Dietrich, Erica Gaida, and me, Dina Temple-Reston. It was edited by Karen Duffin. We'll be back on Tuesday with an all-new episode of Click Here. Have a great weekend.
Looking for more of the cybersecurity and intelligence coverage you get on Click Here? Then check out our sister publication, The Record, from Recorded Future News. You'll get breaking cyber news from reporters in New York, Washington, London, and Kiev, among others. And you'll see for yourself why it attracts hundreds of thousands of page views every month. Just go to therecord.media.